Hey everyone, it's Alan with Alberta Hunter Education Instructors Association, and I'm here with the next video in the OWL series. This one's going to be all about map and compass use. We're going to start off by looking at some different maps and compasses that you might run into out in the field. First of all, if you look at some of these different compasses, they all have basically the same characteristics, but you can see that some of them are a little more complicated than others. This is a very basic compass over here where it's just pointing straight north. There's no way of adjusting for what we call declination, which I'll explain in a little bit. This is a compass that you can adjust the declination. It'll give you a much more accurate reading. You can see that there's some measurements on the sides and even a magnifying glass in the middle for looking at the fine details on your map. This compass here, as you can see, has a mirror on it, and you might wonder what you would want a mirror for on your compass. But the reason for that is that helps you in the field when you are trying to go from one point to another and you need to pick a way site. You can really use the mirror to help you out. Alright, so now we'll move over to the maps. What I have here is a couple of different maps. This one on top here is basically a road map. You'll see this in your hunting guide regulations that this one is basically on the wildlife management units, and you can see the small numbers that give you the management units. But what I want to show here is that it's basically a road map that's taken from a very high height, and doesn't give you a whole lot of detail. But this is what you would use to get from one place to another if you're going by road. The one underneath it, I'll just move this out of the way. The one underneath it is much more detailed, and you can see that it has a number of lines that we weren't seeing on the other one. In particular, these lines here, which are called contour lines. And the contour lines indicate a change in elevation. And basically, when you see lines that are very close together like this, you know that that's a very steep elevation, a cliff or a very steep hill, as opposed to in here where the elevation is very flat. The contour lines are quite distant apart. And by using these contour lines, you can see if you wanted to walk across a certain area, you would know that if you have a hill or if it's nice and flat. And in here you can see that there's some swamps, so this would be pretty wet in here. And you use these types of maps for orienteering, what we call where you're trying to get from one place to another. So this is a perfect map for doing that. A few more features on this map are things like the legend here. So the legend will tell you what some of the symbols and what some of the lines are on this map. This map is pretty straightforward. There's not a whole lot on here other than some of the roads and trails and things like that. Here you see the scale. The scale of this map is 1 to 50,000, meaning that 1 centimeter equals 50,000 centimeters on the ground. So 1 centimeter on the map is 50,000 centimeters on the ground. And if you need to measure shorter distances, then you can use your ruler to actually measure against this scale here. Alright, moving over here, we have the indication of declination for this particular map. Each map is going to have a different indication of declination, and as you can see down here, it actually changes per year. So not only do you have to take into account the declination, but you also have to account for the number of years since the map was drawn and the time that, or the date that you are now. So this one is in 1976, and it shows that it decreases annually by 5.5 minutes, so you'd have to take that into account. In 1976, and we'll just use that for purposes of this video, the declination was 1 degree 23 minutes plus 20 degrees 53 minutes, which gives us 22 minutes and 22 degrees and 16 minutes. Now, understanding declination is important because if we're drawing a line on a map that we want to follow out in the field and we don't set our compass to the correct declination, we'll be going off in the wrong direction, and on this map we'd be going off in the wrong direction by 22 minutes and 16 seconds. So what we're going to do is we're going to plot a course on this map, and we're going to base it on these gray lines here, which are true north and south lines and true east and west, and we'll set the declination so that when we go out in the field and actually look through our compass, the compass will actually be pointing to magnetic north, which is somewhere over here, but it'll read as if it were true north. Okay, now we're going to move to plotting a course on this map. Now, having said that, I want you to understand that if you start marking up your maps, they're not going to be usable for very long. So what I recommend doing is taking a photocopy of this particular map, or the map you're going to be using, and marking on the photocopy. And this is what I've done with this map. So I'm just going to take the map away and I'm going to use the photocopy instead. Now what we're going to do is we are going to plot a course from the motel, from the intersection where the motel is right here, up to Alfred Lake, up to the camp at Alfred Lake, which is located here. And then we're going to go from the camp at Alfred Lake cross country to the gravel pit where my partner is going to pick me up in the vehicle. So I've got the 3 points marked, and now what I'm going to do is I'm going to label them. So I'll just flip it around so that I can label them properly. I'm going to call the motel point A, I'm going to call Alfred Lake point B, and I'm going to call the gravel pit point C. So now what I'm going to do is I'm just going to draw a line between the different points, and then we'll measure those with the compass to see what the bearing is going to be, what the azimuth will be. And if we start at the motel intersection, just going to draw a straight line from there, and then I'm going to go from Alfred Lake to the gravel pit in a straight line. And there, that's all it takes to plot your course. Now the big job is to find out which directions you're going to go when you get out in the field to actually do this. Before we move on, we're going to look at parts of the compass and how they're used when we're plotting courses and when we're making our decisions on where we're going to go. So let's move over to the compass here. This, along the top, you can see top and sides are just simply rulers, measurements. This is in inches, obviously, this is in centimeters, and you can use that to measure distances on your map. Using the scale on the map, you would be able to determine the real distance on the ground. Next thing we'll look at is your direction of travel arrow. So anytime you're plotting a course, you would have this direction of travel arrow pointing from your first point to your second point, might be point A, point B, but you would have your compass oriented so that your direction of travel line is pointing from where you are to where you want to go. Inside here you'll see an arrow inside your compass housing itself. I'm just going to move this out of the way so you can see it. And it's this arrow right in here. And usually this is red. This is a model we got from one of the companies, and for some reason they painted it black, but this should be red. And this will actually move inside the housing and give you your declination. It'll move from here over to wherever you need it, east or west. In Calgary, typically we would have it at about 12 degrees or so to the east. Next, we're going to look at the dial itself, and this is what we call the dial. As you can see, it does move, and you need to have it move so that you can find the direction that you want to go. After that, we have what's called an index line, and the index line, sometimes these will be separated and there'll be a line here, and this is the index line that you need to line up when you are determining your correct direction of travel. Inside here is your magnetic needle. This red portion will always point to magnetic north, and if your declination is set correctly, then when it points to magnetic north and you move your dial so that the dial itself goes inside, so that the orienting arrow and the magnetic needle line up, then you will have your true north and your magnetic north taken care of. The orienting lines are these lines here. We're going to talk about them in a minute, but these are what I'm talking about when I'm talking about orienting lines. And when they move, they rotate inside, and they don't always point straight north. You need them to move off of straight north. And the rest of it, this is just the base plate, and this just stays as it is, and each compass has most of those different features. Alright, we're going to move to the next phase of using map and compass. We've determined the declination on that map is 22 degrees 16 minutes. So now we need to set our compass to reflect that. So on this compass, this is called a Suntu. It's a very good compass made in Finland. And on the back of this compass, you'll see that there's a hole where this pin goes in. The pin came with the compass, obviously. And it goes in, and there's a hole in the dial as well. So they need to line up both holes, put the pin in, and then as you turn it over, you can see that it's set at true north. It's straight north. So what we need to do is we need to move it 22 degrees, and as you can see, it's not that precise, so we're going to stop right about there, and that's pretty close to 22 degrees. And for the purposes of these compasses, that's going to be plenty. So now I'm going to show you a different compass that we can do the same. Alright, so this is called a Silva Ranger, and it's one of the better compasses out there. Personally, I like to use these a lot because they're much easier to pick out your waypoints or where you're going to as you're traveling along in a straight line. So this one is easy to set the declination as well, and you'll see this little set screw right here, and that's what you use. And rather than take you through the laborious process of me trying to set the declination, I'm just going to show you that this is a set screw you use. If you turn it clockwise, the arrow here is going to move over to the right, and we would stop it right at 22 degrees. Okay, so we've drawn the indented path on our map. Now what we're going to do is we're going to check it with the compass to get our bearings. And the way we're going to do that is we're going to use these gray lines for reference, and they're very light on these maps, so you really have to look for them. So there's some there. So it goes into here, and what I've done is I've just enhanced them on this map just so that we can see them, and it makes it easier to use the compass to set our bearing or to determine our bearing. So using the arrow here as our direction of travel, we're going to go from A to B. So I'm going to put the arrow from A to B, and I want to make sure that my dial is covering this gray line here. So I've put it so that I can see the gray line through the compass face. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to line it up with the orienteering lines, and I'm just going to make sure that the orienting line is parallel with the gray line underneath there, and I can read right at the top here, go in from the direction of travel line, and I can see that it's approximately 32 degrees. We'll call it 32 degrees. So what I do then is I take my sheet and I'm going to write in the azimuth from A to B as 32 degrees. Now you see that I also have the distance in here. We would determine the distance later. We're not going to do that for this video, but using the scale on the map that we talked about earlier, we could determine the distance of that line. Okay, so now let's go to the next line. We just move the compass onto that line and turn the compass again so those orienting lines are parallel with the north-south line, and you can see that if we look using the line of travel that we're at about 71 degrees or so. So we'll put 71 degrees. Alright, well, you've seen how to plot a course on a map. Now we're going to go outside and look at using your compass a different way. Alright, well, now we're going to move outside, and I'm going to show you how to use the compass in a couple ways to determine either a direction that you want to go or to find how to get somewhere that you see and you want to find a bearing on it, or you have a bearing and you want to find out how to get there. So come on along and let's go for a little walk. Okay, so what I'm going to do, we're going to use this as our starting point. This post is going to be the starting point. We're going to go from here out to a couple points and come back here, and we're going to take a shot on the first location, which is going to be a sign out in that direction, and from here we're going to take a shot, get our bearing, and we'll walk out that way. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to use the notch on the top of the compass to actually look at that sign, and I'm going to bring it down so that I can see the compass face in the mirror. And then what I do is I turn the compass face so that the red orientation arrow is surrounding the north arrow on the needle, and that tells me that that is sitting at 80 degrees from north. So it's 80 degrees from north from here to that sign. Alright, so here we are at our first point, the sign that we looked at before. Now we're going to go over to a box there with the number 3 on it. That's going to be our second point. Alright, so there's our next point, is the number 3 on the side of that box. So I'm going to do the same procedure. I'm bringing my compass up, I'm aiming at that number 3 through the little notch, and I'm lining up the line through the mirror to the center of the compass. And as I rotate the compass so that the arrow of direction lines up with the red part of the needle, which indicates north, and there, and I look, and it's going to be about 210 degrees. So it's going past south and towards the west, 210 degrees. So off we go. Okay, so from point 2 we're going to shoot back towards our starting point at the post, and it's going to be exactly the same procedure. I'm just bringing the compass up, I'm aiming through the notch, I've got the mirror line through the center of the compass, and I'm simply turning the indicator to line up with the north arrow, and I can see that that is shooting at about 314 degrees. So about 314, just off of north, which looks about pretty correct. Okay, here we are back at our starting post. We've gone 80 degrees to the sign, we've gone 210 to the number 3, and we've come back 314 back to the post. We made a complete circle around, and now we can plot this on a map and we can see exactly what our path is. Okay, now we're going to look at it a little bit differently. Let's say that you had a number of bearings on a piece of paper and you wanted to follow that path and you weren't sure where they were going to take you. So let's say if we use the same bearings that we just shot, let's say that I had on a piece of paper 80 degrees from this post. So I'm going to set the compass to 80 degrees, like so, and now I'm going to use that to find where that's going to end up. Okay, so in this situation I don't know where 80 degrees is. I have my compass set for it, so let me start here, and I can see that that's not 80 degrees because the needle and the direction of travel arrow are not lining up. So I'm going to move, and I can see I have to have it level, and I can see that the needle is moving closer, 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 and now it seems to be in the right spot. And as I look through the notch up top, I can actually see the sign that we looked at before from that 80 degrees. So we've done the opposite of finding the bearing. We've used the bearing to find that post, that sign. Well folks, that's a wrap for the map and compass video. I'd like to thank the fine folks out at the Calgary Firearms Center for allowing us to use this beautiful space. If you have any questions about use of map and compass, give us a call at our AHEIA office in Calgary at Edmonton, or look up AHEIA.com on the internet.